The homologation rules of the World Rally Championship have given us some wonderful, iconic road cars over the years. The rare Group B specials such as the short wheelbase Audi Quattro and Ford RS200. The brilliant Group A cars like Lance's Integrale and the Celica GT4. But since Tommy Mäkinen pedalled his Mitsubishi Evo 6, it was really 6.5 as it was derived from the Mäkinen edition, to the end of its last stage in 2001, the links between the cars on the stages and those on the road have felt tenuous at best. Now though, thanks to Toyota and Mäkinen, the homologation special has returned with this.
The Toyota Gazoo Racing Yaris. We've bought it somewhere that it should feel, well, very at home. This is South Wales, and these roads are not only brilliant to drive, but they're surrounded by fantastic rally stages. Names that will resonate to anyone that's followed Wales Rally GB or the RAC or the Network Q, however you think about it. Names like Resolfin, Riola, Cinguino, Tile. Some amazing things have happened in these hills in rally cars. I don't think there has been another car that I can remember that people have been so excited about. I've had so many messages from people wanting a review of this, people buying one, people wanting to buy one. And I was trying to work out, why is there such excitement about this car? I think it's a number of reasons. I think partly because, well, 2020 hasn't exactly been great, has it? And it's nice to have some good news. Also, this is an entirely new car, and that doesn't happen very often. We're so used to cars being, well, the next in line of something. But I suspect mostly it's just down to the spec of this car. It's extraordinary.
The little GR Yaris is on its own bespoke chassis that is a fusion of the front half of a Yaris with the rear half of a Corolla. While McPherson struts remain up front, there are now trailing double wishbones at the back, in place of the torsion beam arrangement found in the standard Yaris. The four-wheel drive system is all new, and the engine is not only the lightest and smallest 1.6 turbo, but the most powerful 3-cylinder in the world, putting out 257 brake horsepower and 265 pounds-foot of torque. In fact, the whole car is not only small but mighty, thanks to significantly more weld points and extensive use of structural adhesive. Want a geeky fact that's hard to illustrate? 35.4 metres of adhesive is used, 14.6 metres more than on the standard Yaris. Yet despite the strengthening, the whole car weighs just 1,280 kilos. There are other cool things like ball bearings in both the turbo and suspension joints. Aluminium is also used for the transfer case and steering column. Mix it all together and you've got a car that will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 5.5 seconds and hit 143 miles an hour flat out. All for less than £30,000.
Oh, this is so much fun. It feels like a mini GTR almost. The spec of the interior of this car, well, it's kind of very reminiscent of old Mitsubishis and Subarus in terms of it's quite basic and cheap and there's some scratchy plastics, but do you know what? I kind of dig that aesthetic because it reminds me of those Group A homologation cars. I love the fact we've got a properly round wheel in here. It feels a nice sort of small diameter. 13.6 to 1 is the ratio for this. The gear shift, I mean, it's a beautifully sort of hefty mechanical gear shift. They've actually raised the lever 50mm from a standard Yaris, so it falls nice and easily to hand. That's a journalistic cliche for you, but it's true. I love the really simple analog dials in here, just white numbers on a black background with a red needle. Classic. It works.
Talking of working, part of the appeal of this car is that it's still a Toyota and should therefore be reliable and easy to live with. It has things like radar cruise control, lane keep assist, and a reversing camera. Apple CarPlay too. Good podcast that. Yes, the boot is small, the battery is back there now, and the seats are for those of a smaller stature only, but it's still more practical than most sports cars.
Things that aren't quite so good? Well, these seats hold you nicely, but they just seem to be set a bit too high, certainly if you're tall. And then, well, we've got this big screen here, which actually feels like it's angled for a left-hand drive car. Big mirror here, and not really a gap in between, so there's a bit of a blind spot going on there. The pedals, well, obviously I'm glad there are 3 of them, but they are slightly less successful. They seem to be placed for people that want to wear Wellingtons whilst they're doing their heeling and towing. In fact, they talk about there's a little guard on the edge of the brake pedal to stop you catching your foot as you go between throttle and brake, which you can't help thinking they shouldn't really need.
There is a small button with IMT on it that you can press if you want the car to rev match for you, but despite the slightly gappy pedals, I never felt the need. Anyway, enough about the interior because I want to talk a bit more about the exterior.
I thought we'd stop here because just over there is the Ronda Rally stage, which some of you will probably know as, I'll put my bobble hat on for this, Stage 4 from Wales Rally GB 2001, which is where Colin McRae crashed. There's some great onboard footage from Richard Burns' car because he goes through the stage afterwards and he sees the crash, nearly bins it just afterwards. But of course, Burns got to the end and became world champion for 2001. Well, take the bobble hat off because I just want to talk about the car and the whole reason for wanting to build a homologation special, because you can change an awful lot when you're building a WRC car these days, but it's the fundamental body shell that they wanted. So this is the only 3-door Yaris available, and in fact the only bits that really remain from a Yaris are the headlights, this up here, the door mirrors and the rear lights. The rest is all totally bespoke to this car. To that extent, we've got some lightweight panels here. So we've got an aluminium bonnet, aluminium doors, because you can't change those with a WRC car. These are also frameless, which helps them sit flusher with the body, and an aluminium boot as well. But the main reason that they wanted to do this is to change the overall shape of the car to aid aerodynamics. So the roof up here, forged carbon, sits 45mm lower overall, but a massive 95mm lower at the back here, when there should be a huge rear wing. It sort of looks slightly denuded without a rear wing here. It is, though, an awful lot of effort for a rally car that's never going to compete.
You see, Toyota had intended to run the new GR Yaris WRC in the 2021 season of the World Rally Championship. Testing had begun and the signs were good, but then COVID-19 struck. All testing had to be cancelled, and without testing, well, it just wasn't feasible to get it ready in time. So the current spec Yaris WRC will continue in 2021, and then an entirely new set of regulations come in 2022 based around space frame silhouettes. This means the GR Yaris WRC joins a list of very cool what-ifs, like the Group S Audi Quattro and the 2017 Polo WRC. Thankfully there will be a Rally 2 or R5 version of this car, and Toyota has in fact got special permission from the FIA to homologate the little 3-cylinder engine. So it's not a complete waste from a homologation perspective, and it's certainly not a waste from an enthusiast perspective.
So what's it like to drive? Well, as soon as you get into it, it feels really tough. It feels really small as well. Such a tiny wheelbase. It's almost as though it's wider than it is long. I love the drivetrain. I love the way this gear shift feels. I love the 3-cylinder engine in terms of its response, and it really revs. The gearing feels nicely short and it's just punchy, so even if you're not using the top end of the revs, it's still really quick. But then if you want to hang on and go all the way to the red line, it's not one of those turbo engines that just sort of dies towards the top end. We've got 3 handling modes, so we've got normal, and then track and sport is the middle one. That's the one you really want. So in normal, the torque is split as standard 40-60, track 50-50, and then in sport 30-70.
This car also has the circuit pack, which is an extra £3,500. But for this you get Torsen limited slip diffs front and rear, you get stiffer springs, retuned dampers and firmer anti-roll bars. You also get forged instead of cast alloys and Michelin Pilot Sport 4S instead of Dunlop Sportmax tyres.
In terms of how the car drives, it just feels so enthusiastic as soon as you get into it. The handling is interesting. It feels really tough, really grippy. It's not a playful car as such. Coming to corners, I would like just like a a bit more feel from the front end. It's quite hard to judge the front end, so what you end up doing is one of two things really. Either you go slow in and fast out, so you really lean on the rear end as you come out of the corner, be aggressive with the throttle. The other thing you can do is left foot brake, which just helps put some more weight, pressure on the nose, really helps you feel through the corner. And this is a car that you can left foot brake in, which is really nice, because most, certainly hot hatches these days, won't let you do that. The ESC just throws a complete wobbler, but this is absolutely fine with it, and you do need to do it, I think, when you're driving really quickly. The sound of this little 3-cylinder, well, I love the sound of 3-cylinder engines. I think they're really characterful. I think it's definitely one of the benefits of downsizing. However, from outside, it doesn't really sound like very much at all. Inside, sounds pretty good, but I have to warn you, a lot of that sound is being piped through the speakers. It does sound fun though. It really is a tenacious little thing. The roads today are pretty damp / torrentially wet, to be honest, but you can just feel it clawing for grip. The actual four-wheel drive system, well, despite being very much rear biased in the sports setting, it still feels like it's trying to it squares the corner off and then keeps the car straight. It's not a system where you're going to get lots of really playful oversteer on the throttle, certainly not on the road anyway. It'd just be nice to make it perhaps a little bit more Mitsubishi Evo, just with that really sharp turn in, so there, and it would come round.
Of course, there is a little lever between the seats that could help with cornering. In fact, Toyota's own press pack actually advocates it. GR Yaris has a mechanical hand-operated parking brake, which the driver can use for cornering in rally stage driving. This is made possible by a specific function of the GR4 coupling system, which fully opens the coupling when the handbrake is used. So, if you do happen to find yourself on a rally stage, the more conventional braking is also worth mentioning actually, as it feels really strong and the pedal feels fantastically firm. Talking of firm, the ride is definitely on the firm side, but importantly it's never crashy or harsh.
The only thing you notice is over bigger bumps and lumps, that's when the car can feel, I think it's probably to do with the fact it's a short wheelbase, and it doesn't quite feel settled on the road sometimes. Overall, it is just a really fun little car that puts a smile on your face from the moment you get into it. I love the backstory to it. I love this engine and gearbox. I think it's not perfect, definitely not perfect, but I'm so glad it exists.
At the end of the day, with the light rapidly fading and me wondering how easily you could fit a lamp pod on the Yaris's bonnet, we headed back out of the hills to one final rally-related destination. I'd be really intrigued to try a standard non-circuit pack car to see if the slightly softer setup aids the feel from the front end. And conversely, I was also left wondering what an even more focused version might be like. An Evans edition, perhaps. And where is our stage end in this GR Yaris? Well,
Margam Park.
Scene of Lewis Moyer's famous helmet-hurling Corolla rear window destroying incident in 1998. Not something Toyota would perhaps like to remember, but something that has stuck with me.
Anyway, it's nice bringing this GR Yaris, a Toyota success story, back to the scene of their failure.